Examining the events that impact and shape China and the rest of the world. This is the Beijing Hour, 1 hour of news and information brought to you every weekday. Now here's your host.
Shane Bigham with you on this Tuesday, August 17th, 2021. You're listening to the Beijing Hour, live from the Chinese capital. On today's program, Chinese officials are expressing hope that the people of Afghanistan can rebuild their homeland following decades of conflict, but they're blaming the U.S. for the situation in the country right now. Rescuers continue to search for survivors in Haiti following the earthquake that struck over the weekend, and students in Thailand are adapting to the new post-COVID world. In business, China's housing market shows signs of easing. In sports, the torch relay for China's national games. In culture and entertainment, how the gig economy is creating opportunity for artists. Now the day's top stories. China says it hopes the Afghan people can stay away from war and rebuild their homeland. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Hua Chunying made the remarks after the Afghan Taliban declared the war in the country over. Liu Yang has details.
The Foreign Ministry's spokesperson Hua Chunying has made China's stance clear, and she says Beijing respects the will of Afghan people and that stopping war and achieving peace is the shared aspiration of both the Afghan people and the international community. And the Taliban says the war in Afghanistan is over, and they will negotiate the establishment of what they call an open and inclusive Islamic government. And they say they will take responsible actions to guarantee the safety of Afghan citizens and foreign personnel across the country. And we also know that China says it looks forward to seeing these words translated into action so a smooth transition of power can take place. It calls for an end to terrorist and criminal acts so the Afghan people can rebuild their homeland. And while most Chinese citizens have now left Afghanistan, Hua Chunying also said the Chinese embassy in Afghanistan is still open and that it will provide services for anyone still in the country.
That was Liu Yang reporting. The Chinese ambassador to Afghanistan says all embassy workers are safe. Wang Yu says most of the Chinese nationals in Afghanistan have evacuated under embassy advice, and staff say they will continue to encourage the rest of them to leave while protecting their safety.
The embassy has helped Chinese nationals get China's COVID-19 vaccines on a voluntary basis. Since Sunday, the embassy has been asking about their conditions, and there are no reports of injuries or deaths.
The ambassador also blames the United States for the current situation in Afghanistan. The ambassador adds that the Chinese embassy is willing to push forward bilateral ties, and he hopes all parties in Afghanistan will prioritize the interests of the country and its people. U.S. President Joe Biden says the deteriorating situation in Afghanistan did unfold more quickly than the United States had anticipated. However, Biden added that he stands by the decision to withdraw U.S. troops from the war-torn country. Biden blamed what happened in Afghanistan over the last few days on U.S.-backed political leaders abandoning the country and the military lacking the will to fight. The United States has ordered the deployment of roughly 6,000 troops to Afghanistan to support the personnel evacuation mission. At least 7 people are believed to have died at the Kabul airport as they rushed to leave Afghanistan after the Taliban entered the capital. All U.S. personnel have reportedly been evacuated to the airport. The United States has reached an agreement with the Taliban to ensure that evacuations from Kabul's airport can take place without interference from the group. Reports say both sides agreed to de-escalate their conflict following meetings in Doha. Former U.S. President Donald Trump is calling for his successor, Joe Biden, to resign over the swift takeover of Afghanistan by the Taliban. It comes as the Taliban's taken over Afghanistan in a lightning surge 20 years after they were toppled by a U.S. invasion. The U.S. is deploying around 6,000 troops to Afghanistan to support the personnel drawdown. For more on the Afghan situation from the perspective of U.S. foreign policy, Sui spoke with Vice President Rong Ying at the China Institute of International Studies.
So what policy do we expect the Biden administration will take from now on regarding Afghanistan and the region?
I think there are a lot of uncertainties with regard to the U.S. policy. It's difficult to speculate at this moment, but I think we can just look at a few things. The positions of the U.S. on the few issues. First and foremost, of course, is whether U.S. The administration Biden would continue the talks or contact with the Taliban, because as we know that according to the Doha deal, there have been very frequent contacts for that, even though they do not recognize diplomatically, officially, the Taliban. Which leads to my second point, that on what grounds and what conditions U.S. is going to accept the reality by recognizing diplomatically, officially, the Taliban. And this is something I think, again, we have to wait and see, even though, again, Secretary Blinken has touched upon in his interview about the conditions for that.
When the U.S. policymaking and also academic circles look back at the 20-year anti-terrorism war and how it ended, and how will this going to affect their future decision-making and also mindset towards foreign policy?
I don't see officially there will be a kind of thorough reflections about the U.S. policy towards Afghanistan in the past 2 decades, and particularly in terms of its counterterrorism strategy for counterterrorism. But you're right. I think the media, they are being loudly, vocally, and calling upon a deep, thorough, thought-provoking reflections of what has been wrong. What has been wrong in terms of the specific decisions to withdraw Afghan troops 3 months ago, which led to the current situation in Afghanistan from the viewpoint of the United States, and what the kind of lessons the U.S. should learn, but more importantly, what kind of implications, impacts are happening in Afghanistan. Interestingly, I think the media, the academic are very much, I think, vocal, and very much, in a way that they, by referring what happened 40 more years ago about the Cyclone and others, and the impacts on the credibilities and reliability of the U.S. for its allies and partners. I would expect that there are some debate along that line, but we have to be very clear, I think, to withdraw troops from Afghanistan and cut or reduce the military presence from the abroad is something widely supported by the U.S. sort of public. So I don't see a big change in this regard.
That was Vice President Rong Ying at the China Institute of International Studies commenting on the U.S.-Afghan policy. The Chinese foreign minister says Beijing stands ready to communicate with the United States to push for a soft landing on the Afghan issue. In a phone conversation with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Wang Yi also said that China encourages Afghanistan to establish an open and inclusive political framework in accordance with its own national situation. The U.S. diplomat expressed his hopes that China will play an important role in the orderly transfer of power and establishment of an inclusive government in Afghanistan. As the transfer of power is ongoing in Afghanistan, Associate Professor Wang Jin of Northwest University of China warns that this process may create more uncertainties in the region.
The transfer of power inside Afghanistan actually will bring about a lot of uncertainties in the region, because on the one hand, a lot of political powers inside Afghanistan are still worried about maybe the revenge from Afghan Taliban. And meanwhile, we have to know that if we look back the history, especially in the 1990s, before 2001, Afghan Taliban, its foreign policies are very conservative, or even to sometimes very aggressive to the neighboring countries. So a lot of uncertainties still remain, although the Afghan Taliban, they promised that they would obey the international society's principles, and also they would not tolerate the extremism and terrorism inside the country. But still a lot of uncertainty, still a lot of things are unknown. So that's why I think more instabilities and a lot of uncertainties might be there, and also gave rise to the worries of the neighboring states and also the regional states.
Last month, the Afghan Taliban sent a delegation to China and held talks with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi. The professor expresses a cautiously upbeat view about future ties between Beijing and the group.
The ties between Afghan Taliban and China is actually very positive, because we see the visits of Afghan Taliban delegation to China, the attitudes expressed by Afghan Taliban as representative towards China were very positive, and they have already promised that they will not tolerate any extremism and terrorism in the country, and they will not support the extremists that harbored the intention of attacking China inside Afghanistan. So this is a very positive signal, and I think this is a very good beginning for the future developments between Afghan and Taliban and China. But we have to also to know that Afghan Taliban is a political and military organization upholding the Wahhabi Islamic principle, which is very conservative. And also, given the Afghan Taliban's history, this is very difficult to say that whether or not they could keep the promise. Especially, we have to know there were still a lot of divisions inside the country. So we have to wait and see whether or not they can keep the promises, they can keep their words. So I am confident over the ties between China and Afghan Taliban, but we have to also be alert to the moves and any unfriendly words from Afghan Taliban in the future.
Meanwhile, Pakistani scholar Zun Ahmed Khan suggests that the Shanghai Cooperation Organization could play a positive role in the transition of Afghanistan.
You know, the SCO is all about dialogue, all about enhancing trust. It's about pursuing a multifaceted strategy, including economy, people-to-people cultural ties, and also obviously strategic cooperation between countries. And we are not just talking about the 8 member states, we are talking about the 18 members of the SCO family, which includes dialogue partners and also observers, where Afghanistan comes in. So I think the SCO is integral because the region is SCO. The region that surrounds Afghanistan is SCO. And the role they are already playing for a few years is to enhance dialogue, to enhance mutual trust, to help countries figure out a strategy to improve how they can cooperate and move forward from one platform, from one multilateral initiative. So the role is obviously build trust, ensure that the government that comes in Kabul next is able to communicate effectively with other governments and also pursue long-term endeavors. The long-term vision of the SCO is obviously enhancing cooperation, enhancing economic cooperation, people-to-people ties, building bridges between within the region. So I think the SCO is absolutely integral. After 20 years of an uncertain war, of an uncertain situation, we do see now that Afghanistan is closer to ending war than it ever was. However, this is going to be a process, and the political process, that is something that the SCO can definitely play a very positive role in by engaging the right stakeholders.
And here's Wen Zhou with a brief review of how the current Afghanistan issue has developed over the decades.
In 1979, the former Soviet Union sent thousands of troops into Afghanistan. During the following years, an estimated 1 million civilians were killed and around 6 million individuals fled as refugees to other countries. The Taliban means students in the Pashto language. It first emerged in 1994 amid a civil war for the control of the country following the withdrawal of the Soviet troops and the subsequent collapse of the government. The year 2001 marked a turning point for the rule of the group. Following the 9/11 attacks, the United States invaded Afghanistan under the pretext of fighting terrorism. The U.S. dethroned the Taliban regime and its alleged supporter, the Al-Qaeda network. Over the past 20 years, more than 2,400 U.S. troops have been reportedly killed and 20,000 others were wounded while serving in Afghanistan. It's also estimated that around 47,600 civilians have been killed and more than double that number have been injured in Afghanistan over the same period. But the outcomes of the 20-year war remain controversial. According to some analysts, only the Taliban and Al-Qaeda were operational in Afghanistan back in 2001. But today, more than 20 militant groups, including the Islamic State, are active in the country. And conflicts again flared up across the war-torn country after the U.S. and NATO troops began to pull out from the country. For the Beijing Hour, this is Wen Jie.
Coming up, the rescue efforts ongoing in Haiti following the earthquake.
Lhasa. Ningchi, Shagats, railway tripping, Tibetan style, in the history of Round Table.
We're actually bringing you with us on a train from Xining to Lhasa.
There goes the siren of the train.
I feel like I'm in a movie set.
See you on Round Table.
More than 1,400 people have been confirmed dead in the earthquake that hit Haiti last weekend. Jean Thibert takes a look at rescue efforts underway now.
Underground right now, rescue missions are ongoing. We had like a few evacuation. They took the more seriously around the people from Lekai to Port-au-Prince so they can have better care because the hospital here is saturated and people start to lack a lot of stuff. Water is missing, food, people start to not having food. So the situation is getting a little bit worse and worse here down on the ground. The army is still digging destroyed building, getting out dead bodies out of the rubbles, and a lot of people are fleeing the country right now. A lot of people, the city right now, the city of Lekai, a lot of people are taking the buses to go to nearby cities where they can find more supplies like water, food, and care. The evacuation process is very slow.
That was Jean Thibert on rescue efforts in Haiti. Humanitarian aid is flowing into Haiti. Chilean President Sebastián Piñera announced that his country has sent aid which includes food, water, and medical supplies.
Los chilenos sabemos y conocemos.
Chileans know and understand what a devastating earthquake means and what it means in terms of suffering and pain for the people who have to live through these adversities. Therefore, we have all the reasons in the world to accompany, support, and help the people of Haiti today in these moments of so much pain and anguish.
The earthquake destroyed thousands of homes and other buildings and left at least 5,700 people injured. Yesterday, Tropical Depression Grace drenched Haiti, threatening to dump 38 centimeters of rain as many survivors wait in open fields for assistance. The U.S. Coast Guard has sent a crew to assist with relief efforts and assess the areas impacted by the quake. A small town in Hubei province has restored order after being hit hard by a flash flood. Liaolin was one of the many locations affected by unusually heavy rainfall in areas along the Yangtze River, the largest waterway in China. Guoyan reports.
Liaolin town has restored order after the heaviest sudden downpour on record in the mountainous region claimed 21 lives and left 4 missing. Over 1,000 people have been affected in the township of 20,000 residents. According to local authorities, daily necessities, food and water are being dispatched to the affected residents daily. Streets have been cleared up, while water, electricity, and communication have been generally repaired in most places, as local authorities raced against the clock to repair the town's infrastructure. The deaths were caused by a downpour that many residents described as having an intensity that they had never seen before. The average depth of water reached 3.5 meters, with the deepest areas reaching 5 meters when torrential rains hit the town. Facing such extreme weather, experts say disaster emergency management and risk analysis are paramount for places that are surrounded by mountains. Zhang Weijun is general manager of eWaters, a water resources management firm based in Shanghai.
Water is running down the mountain very fast. The devastation of the torrent depends on the location of the city. Mountain torrents rush down with massive destructive power. Comprehensive risk analysis is critical before a city is built. The ramifications of various risks should be fully taken into consideration. The importance of risk assessment manifests itself as urbanization accelerates.
Suzhou witnessed the highest number of casualties of the 3 severely hit regions in Hubei province, where rainfall has affected over 280,000 residents. Central authorities have sent a team to facilitate local rescue efforts. Meanwhile, 30 million yuan, or about $4.6 million has been earmarked to support emergency rescue and disaster relief efforts. The Ministry of Water Resources has warned of further flooding in some of the country's major river basins in mid to late August. During the period, they are likely to exceed the warning levels in some sections of the Yellow River, Yangtze River, and Haihe River, with typhoons triggering regional downpours and floods. All these areas are on high alert and are closely monitoring the flood situations in order to take precautions. For the Beijing Hour, this is Guo Yan.
Coming up, students in Thailand adapting to the post-COVID world.
South Africa is now battling a new variant of the coronavirus.
I am Gao Junya, reporting from Harare, Zimbabwe.
Ms von der Leyen warned that until a sufficient portion of Europe's 450 million person population are protected, for the Beijing Hour, I'm Benji Haya in Brussels.
As the deal was announced, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, this is Liang Tao in London.
Statistics show that the number of people battling depression in Sweden, Chen Shifei, Stockholm.
Efforts are underway across the United States to make polling stations. I'm William Denslow in New York.
Stay up to date with the latest headlines and everything China-related.
For the Beijing Hour, I'm Fu Yu.
I'm Shen Ting.
This is Fei Fei.
I'm Xiao Yi.
Everything in focus, all in one package. The Beijing Hour.
Vocational and college students in Thailand are adapting to the new post-COVID world. Unable to attend traditional classes due to pandemic restrictions, many students are experiencing an unexpected summer vacation. Adriel Telemantes has more.
Thailand is known regionally as an academic center, with over 300 colleges, universities, and vocational institutions throughout the country, along with 1.7 million university students. This time of year would normally see them busy attending classes, studying, and preparing for exams, but the third wave of COVID-19 that has impacted the nation since April has prevented the normal rhythm of higher education learning from resuming. The new semester would have normally started in May, but many institutions have been strictly conducting online distance learning due to COVID-19 since last year. The freedom to study and do schoolwork from home is appealing to some, but some of the most important parts of normal student life are unfortunately impossible. With socializing, study groups, and other communal activities curtailed, students have started to rely on social media and the internet even more to stay connected, though there are still shortcomings. Sunisa from Surendra Rajabat University in Suratani complains it's been difficult having to do it alone.
In the class, we have friends. If we do not understand something, we can consult each other, and then the professor can explain also. But now we need to understand by ourselves. The professor just teaches. It's architecture, a very difficult subject, and we can't understand. I cannot do anything, cannot go outside because of COVID-19. Normally, when we are tired or have a problem, we do not deal with it alone. But now we have to be self-reliant. Having friends was one of the things that made me enjoy going to class.
While some young people have faced difficulty with the present circumstances, others have taken time to work on personal hobbies and interests. Some have taken time to reconnect with their families and help during these difficult economic times. Pim, a student at Thammasat University in Bangkok, shares her thoughts.
I think like most of my friends love to study at the university, but when the COVID started and the university start to make the study from home program, a lot of my friends who live at home have to like stay at home, and they don't get to talk with their friends.
With the global pandemic well into its second year, the evolving nature of our governments and society's reaction to it will continue to change. The benefits and drawbacks are carefully weighed, though, and the intention of these measures is hoped to be in the best interest of each individual country. Students' lives, along with those of nearly every demographic of society, have been affected by COVID-19's impact on the world. The lessons learned by them during this time will be of great value when they in turn take their place in society, having lived through difficulties never before seen in this generation. For the Beijing Hour, this has been Adriel Talamantes in Bangkok.
After eradicating extreme poverty, China's making efforts to ensure people in rural areas don't fall back to hardship. And one way is tourism. Hu Chao reports.
60-year-old Yang Yanmei is performing for tourists in the yard of her house. She lives in Lijiashan village outside Qikou Old Town. In the past, Yang and her husband made a living by farming, Now, as more tourists come, they have transformed their old house into a homestay. Yang has also become a tour guide. In peak season, she has earned up to 2,000 yuan in a day.
Tourism has brought big changes to us. Many elderly women here like me now work as tour guides and earn more than before. Decades ago, life was hard and my family could only earn about 2,000 yuan a year. But now we can earn tens of thousands of yuan a year. I'm very happy.
Lijiashan village dates back to the Ming and Qing dynasties. The distinctive architecture has been well preserved. Most are courtyards and cave houses, creating a spectacular view that attracts photographers and culture enthusiasts.
I am amazed by the architecture. Preserving the architecture and improving living standards are not contradictory.
The Lijiashan village is a tourist highlight of Qikou Old Town, which was once a famed trading location along the Yellow River during the Ming and Qing dynasties. But town declined and sank into poverty amid the rise of highway and railway transport. But officials have encouraged villagers to cater to tourists, build transport infrastructure, and improve the living facilities.
The homestay business here is good. During the holidays, every homestay here is full of guests. This is all thanks to official support.
In 2019, tourism was credited with lifting Qikou out of extreme poverty. The town's annual average income per capita doubled to 6,000 yuan from 2013. Unfortunately, the number of tourists has fallen because of the pandemic. But officials say if the pandemic eases, they expect the annual number of tourists in the town and its surrounding areas to reach 3 million by 2026.
That was Hu Chao reporting. Beijing today, a sunny forecast and 30 degrees Celsius, a low of 21 this evening. Chongqing's cloudy and 35 with a low of 26. Laos is getting showers on the day and 24 degrees, the low is 12. Hong Kong's cloudy and 32, a low of 28. It's time for a short break. So far this hour, Chinese officials are expressing hope that the people of Afghanistan can rebuild their homeland following decades of conflict. Rescuers continue to search for survivors in Haiti following the earthquake that struck over the weekend. And students in Thailand are adapting to the new post-COVID world. Shane Bigham with you. Stay with us here on the Beijing Hour.
Join the most popular Chinese language learning page on Facebook by searching for CRI Learn Chinese. It's a quick yet fun way to achieve your language goals. Start your free lessons now with unlimited videos, photos, and text tutorials on expressions and Chinese culture. CRI Learn Chinese Facebook page. A world opens with 你好.
ChinaPlus.cri.cn is your home for everything you want to know about China.
The latest news in China and everything China-related from around the world.
Everything in focus, all in one place, bringing you vital information for your business and travel.
Chinese culture, language learning, and more.
ChinaPlus.cri.cn.
ChinaPlus.cri.cn. Your portal into today's Middle Kingdom.
The Beijing Hour. The Beijing Hour.
The Beijing Hour brings you an hour of comprehensive news and information from both China and the rest of the world. A mix of news, sports, and entertainment. In-depth analysis of the day's big stories, as well as the most comprehensive business of the day. The Beijing Hour. Your very own window to China and the rest of the world.
Examining the events that impact and shape China and the rest of the world. This is the Beijing Hour, 1 hour of news and information brought to you every weekday. Now here's your host,
Shane Bigham with you on this Tuesday morning. Still to come in business, China's housing market shows signs of easing. In sports, the torch relay for China's national games. In culture and entertainment, how the gig economy is creating opportunities for artists. To contact us, you can email beijinghour@cri.com.cn. Now the day's headlines. A Chinese envoy to the United Nations says China respects the wishes and choices of the Afghan people. Gang Shuang says achieving peace is the expectation of both the Afghan people and the international community.
The pressing task at the moment is to restore peace, stability, and order as soon as possible, so as to avoid unnecessary casualties and large-scale refugees to the utmost extent possible.
The Deputy Permanent Representative also called on all parties in Afghanistan to protect the safety, security, and interests of all foreign nationals in the country. The Chinese ambassador to Afghanistan says all embassy workers are safe. Wang Yu says most of the Chinese nationals in Afghanistan have evacuated to safety under embassy advice, and staff say they will continue to encourage the rest of them to leave while protecting their safety.
The embassy has helped Chinese nationals get China's COVID-19 vaccines on a voluntary basis. Since Sunday, the embassy has been asking about their conditions, and there are no reports of injuries or deaths.
The ambassador also blames the United States for the current situation in Afghanistan, and he hopes all parties in Afghanistan will prioritize the interests of the country and its people. The Chinese foreign minister says China and Russia should jointly defend the truth of history, human dignity, and the achievements of World War II. Wang Yi made the remarks during a phone conversation with his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov. The Chinese foreign minister says recent offerings by Japanese officials at Yasukuni Shrine are a challenge to human conscience and international justice. Lavrov says that the two countries have launched important cooperation in defending historical truth and opposing attempts to tamper with the records of World War II. The Chinese Foreign Ministry says the work of tracing the origins of the COVID-19 virus must be led by member states of the World Health Organization. Last week, the WHO urged countries to collaborate to further virus origin studies and called on the process not to be politicized or turned into a finger-pointing exercise. The Foreign Ministry says the origin tracing is of great importance and must be led by WHO member states. China continues to see more foreigners living in the country coming forward to get their COVID-19 shots. Students studying at different universities in the country are among the people who've received vaccines offered by China. A party chief at Southwest University in Chongqing said up to 50% of their overseas students have been vaccinated. According to reports, China's vaccinated more than 350,000 expats with about 600,000 doses so far. China's also provided around 770 million doses of vaccines to more than 100 countries and international organizations to help fight the virus. An outline for studying Xi Jinping thought on diplomacy has been published. The book was published jointly by the People's Publishing House and the Shuishi Publishing House. It systematically explains the significance, essence, and implications of Xi Jinping thought on diplomacy. It also fully reflects on the contributions of Xi Jinping thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era in the arena of foreign affairs. China's pledge to strengthen fiscal and monetary policy to boost employment in the current 14th five-year plan period, which is between this year and 2025. Chinese Premier Li Keqiang chaired an executive meeting of the country's State Council in Beijing yesterday. The meeting urged authorities at all levels to respond effectively to the new challenges facing the economy and to keep the economy within a reasonable range. Data released yesterday shows that China's industrial output grew by 6.4% year-on-year in July, but dropped 1.9% from June. The meeting noted the effects of flooded experience in some parts of the country, a resurgence of COVID-19 cases, high commodity prices, and other external pressures. The meeting called for stronger fiscal and monetary policies to help boost employment, help business, secure market supply, and keep prices stable. Blue Origin has sued the U.S. government over NASA's decision to award a $2.9 billion lunar lander contract to Elon Musk's company, SpaceX. Jeff Bezos' company says the lawsuit's an attempt to remedy the flaws in the acquisition process found in NASA's human landing system. Both the Government Accountability Office and NASA agreed to pick a single lunar lander provider, rejecting Blue Origin's protest. NASA said earlier that the decision will allow NASA and SpaceX to establish a timeline for the first crewed landing on the moon in more than 50 years. This is Shane Bigham live from the Chinese capital. Coming up in business, China's housing market shows signs of easing.
The Beijing Hour. The Beijing Hour.
The Beijing Hour brings you an hour of comprehensive news and information from both China and the rest of the world. A mix of news, sports, and entertainment. In-depth analysis of the day's big stories, as well as the most comprehensive business of the day. The Beijing Hour. Beijing Hour. Your very own window to China and the rest of the world.
Turning to business now, and U.S. markets finished mixed on Monday as investors worried that a resurgence in COVID-19 infections would slow the economic recovery. Europe closed lower. Market observer John Terrett has more.
Here's the Dow then, ahead by 1/3 of 1%, 110 points. That's a session high. It had been down around 284 points earlier in the day when everything I was just touching on was going on. Led up in the end by United Health, Home Depot and Visa. That is a closing record for the Dow. Nasdaq down 1/5 of 1%. And the S&P 500 ahead by 1/4 of 1% or 11 points. Healthcare, utilities and consumer staples all doing well. That's a closing high for the S&P 500 as well. Energy was the worst performer because of the China data impacting on the price of oil and the presumed lack of demand for oil going forward. On to European numbers now. Very much a down day there. In London, 0.9 of 1%. Germany, 1/3 of 1%. France, 0.8 of 1%, and I think it's fair to say it was the Afghanistan situation that was truly weighing on investors' minds in Europe on Monday.
Wall Street's been assessing the impacts of surging COVID-19 cases as the pandemic continues in the United States, with the Delta variant in a sustained uptrend and hospitalizations on the rise. Chinese markets closed mixed on Monday. Analyst Timothy Pope has more.
The Chinese onshore markets were broadly lower. The latest economic data wasn't all that inspiring as more cases of the Delta variant in several provinces added to economic pressures that China had already been feeling from various natural disasters. The Shanghai Composite Index closed pretty much flat, but we saw some weakness among EV stock that hit the Chinext board pretty hard. It was off by about 1.3%. So let's start with EVs. BYD shares shed almost 5%. It's now erased all the gains that it made so far in August. Battery maker CATL was also down by around 5%, and power storage firm Yongfu Power Engineering fell by 20%. Yongfu Power tanked after CATL announced that it was selling around a 3% equity stake in the company after Yongfu shares hit an all-time high last week. That 3% is a bit less than half of CATL's stake in Yongfu. Materials and industrials were also off, but there were gains for consumer discretionary stocks, especially the big three appliance makers, Midea, Gree and Haier. Midea stocks topped the list today with gains of about 4.7%.
That was market analyst Timothy Pope in Shanghai. In Hong Kong, the Hang Seng Index closed down around 0.8%. In Singapore, the Straits Times Index was down 0.6%. In Japan, the Nikkei closed down by 1.6%. Official data shows that China's industrial output went up 6.4% year-on-year in July as production demand continued to recover. The National Bureau of Statistics says growth slowed down by 1.9% from June. The figure reflects an increase of 11.5% from the same level in July 2019. Bringing the average growth rate of the past 2 years to 5.6%. Retail sales of consumer goods reached around 3.5 trillion yuan, or $540 billion US dollars, growing by 8.5% year-on-year and down from the 12% in June. Fixed assets for the first 7 months of the year rose by around 10% to more than 30 trillion yuan. China added more than 1.2 million new urban jobs, on track to meet its target of creating more than 11 million new jobs this year. And with more, we're joined by financial analyst Einar Tangen. Good morning, and first up, what's your assessment of China's latest economic data and its impact on the market?
Well, quite frankly, it seems that Beijing is interested in skimming the froth off the top to contain a number of bubbles that have been forming. This is a struggle between the real and speculative economies. Beijing is obviously more comfortable with their economic growth projections, and you can expect them to have jobs, disposable income, and social concerns be ahead of profit.
Well, external uncertainties, natural disasters, and the resurgence of COVID-19, of course, have obviously had an impact on the economy. So how long do you expect this slowdown in growth to last?
Well, you're pointing to man-made disasters, which obviously the Chinese government can control, and then also external factors such as how the world deals with COVID-19, especially the vaccination. Right now, we're looking at 2024 before that's even near accomplished in terms of the underdeveloped world. So it's very difficult to tell within that period if more variants crop up, what's going to happen. So right now, it's uncertain. Once again, the uncertainty is the way governments are handling COVID-19.
Well, the National Bureau of Statistics says the recovery is still unstable, as I guess you just pointed out too, and uneven. So what measures do you expect to see being implemented to support the economy?
Well, I think people should be expecting Beijing to continue its pragmatic approach. Only expect action if the targets set for growth, jobs, disposable income aren't being met. Then you could see some fiscal monetary push and also additional money put into investment, infrastructure projects, etc. But it'll be very narrowly targeted. The main concern right now is making sure that the small, medium-sized enterprises come back, because those are really the backbone. They were the ones who were hurt over the last 2 years, and they're the ones who really Beijing sees as a big priority.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning. That's financial analyst Einar Tangen with an analysis of China's economic data for the first 7 months of 2021. Chinese authorities say economic growth in July has met expectations despite the resurgence of COVID-19 cases and severe floods. Spokesperson Fu Linghui with the National Bureau of Statistics provided an update on the economic data, and Sui Huayao reports.
In July, several events have posed serious challenges to China's domestic economy. Central China's Henan province was ravaged by heavy floods. Then there was the wave of the Delta variant of COVID-19, which triggered outbreaks across the country. But despite the difficulties, Chinese authorities say the national economy maintained its steady recovery through July.
Some major macro indicators did slow down due to various uncertainties like the flooding. For instance, the total retail sales of consumer goods in Henan went down in July. The Purchasing Managers' Index was lower than June's number. But overall, the indicators are within a reasonable range.
Officials say the production of agricultural goods remained stable, industrial production grew steadily, and the growth of investment in manufacturing accelerated. The total value added of industrial enterprises above the designated size grew by 6.4% in July, higher than the same period for 2019 and 2020.
The service sector continued to recover and market sales continued to grow. In July, the total retail sales of consumer goods was up by 8.5%. Online retail sales grew especially rapidly. Consumption recovery was continuing.
For the second half of 2021, the spokesperson said economic growth may slow down because of the relatively sound performance in the second half of 2020. Going forward, authorities say the country's economic recovery still faces an increasingly complex external environment and the pandemic. To ensure stability, the spokesperson said deepening supply-side reforms and advancing high-quality growth is crucial. And the epidemic prevention and control measures should be strictly implemented to facilitate economic growth.
That was Sui Huayao reporting on China's latest economic data. You're listening to the Beijing Hour. Turning to sports now, and here's Yang Guang.
Thank you, Shane. The torch relay for China's 14th National Games officially started in Xi'an on Monday morning. At a ceremony held at the ancient city wall, Olympic champion Qin Kai was the first to carry the torch. 100 torchbearers ran the 5-kilometer relay, which passed some of the city's signature buildings. The flame will make its way to the Xi'an Olympic Sports Center Stadium through 13 cities across Shanxi province in the following 28 days. The National Games will start on September the 15th. Beijing held a ceremony on Monday to mark the 200-day countdown to the 2022 Paralympic Winter Games. Organizing committee official Lu Qing says they are gearing up for promoting the Paralympic education, especially among young people.
Currently, China has 835 demonstration schools for Olympic and Paralympic education. We have provided more online educational materials for Paralympic education. For example, we have made animations about the Paralympic Games to attract the public, especially teenagers, to learn about the Paralympics.
The committee also announced it will collect Paralympics-related artworks created by children and teenagers with disabilities and present them at the Paralympic Games next year. The Beijing 2022 Winter Paralympics will be held from March the 4th to 13th. Reports say Lionel Messi is expected to make his Paris Saint-Germain debut in the Ligue 1 game away to Reims on August 29th. Messi trained for only the third time on Monday following his switch from Barcelona and is in the process of reaching head coach Mauricio Pochettino's standards of fitness. He has not had a full preseason this summer after winning the Copa America with Argentina. Messi was in the stands for PSG's win over Strasbourg on the weekend as he continues to settle into the French capital. Real Madrid goalkeeper Thibaut Courtois has signed a new contract with the club until 2026. The Belgian keeper joined the La Liga side from Chelsea in 2018. He will be 34 when his deal expires. In tennis, Daniil Medvedev has claimed his fourth ATP Masters 1000 crown at the Canadian Masters. The world number 2 overcame American Riley Opelka 6-4, 6-3 to become the first Russian champion at the tournament since Marat Safin in 2000.
Yeah, I couldn't have dreamed of at one point. I was already, let's say, top 100, maybe even had few ATP 250 titles, but at this moment, even to get to quarters or semis of a Masters, especially with Novak and Rafa playing, seemed like an untouchable achievement. Now I have four winners in 5 finals, which is a good score, and I'm just happy.
Opelka is currently ranked 32nd but should move up after playing in his first ATP Masters 1000 tournament final. Medvedev and Opelka will look to carry the momentum of their Canadian hardcourt successes in the US at the Western and Southern Open this week. The Chinese leg of the Grand Prix of figure skating has been cancelled because of COVID-19 restrictions. The Cup of China was scheduled to take place from November the 4th to 7th in Chongqing. The IOC invited the members who were interested in being a replacement host to make an application. 6 events make up the Grand Prix of figure skating series. They lead up to the Grand Prix final, which will take place in Japan in December. The organizers of Formula One's Sao Paulo Grand Prix have requested a date change for the event, but assured that the race will go on this year. Authorities wish the race set to be held on November the 7th can be pushed back a week on November the 14th, a day before a national holiday. Sao Paulo State Governor João Doria says he expects a full crowd.
Quero mencionar também que com o avanço da vacinação na capital de São Paulo.
I would like to point out that with the increase in vaccination rate in the city of Sao Paulo as well as at the state of Sao Paulo, a new batch of tickets will be sold starting August the 27th, creating the possibility of having 100% of fan capacity at Interlagos Speedway.
The 2020 edition of Brazil GP was not held due to the pandemic. With a new promoter and a new contract with F1, the race has been rebranded as the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. In the NBA, the Los Angeles Clippers have brought back guard Eric Bledsoe to the team from the Memphis Grizzlies in exchange for 3 players. The Clippers sent guards Patrick Beverley and Rajon Rondo and center Daniel Oturu to Memphis for Bledsoe, who returns after playing his first 3 NBA seasons in LA. Bledsoe played with the New Orleans Pelicans last season and was moved to the Grizzlies in a 3-team trade. He has averaged 14 points and 4.7 assists in his career and has also played for the Phoenix Suns and the Milwaukee Bucks.
Thank you very much. You're listening to the Beijing Hour. Coming up in culture and entertainment, how the gig economy is creating opportunities for artists. The gig economy is playing an increasingly important part in China, and it's opening new spaces for creatives. A Chinese artist is turning food into handicrafts while earning a profit. Cao Bing has the story.
For Pan Baoxing, making food miniature, the name for small-scale replicas of real-life dishes, is where she discovered what she calls self-value.
18年的时候啊，当时是因为其实，就
I started to pick up food miniature in 2019 and I fell in love with it immediately, but I didn't have much time for it because I had a job. In early 2020, we stayed at home because of the beginning of the outbreak of COVID-19, so I got the chance to think the matter over and over. Finally, I decided to make a change.
She made the decision to quit her job and start a photography studio with her friends, which allows her both a stable income and the free time to make food miniature. And after 2 years of continuous practice, her skills have come a long way. From fluffy cakes and creamy donuts to plump Chinese dumplings, Pan can replicate all kinds of dishes with the same shape and appearance, only much smaller in size. When she posted some of her best works on her social media page, she immediately received lots of likes and comments, not to mention orders from customers.
Now I get orders every month, but so far the income is unstable. There are times when only a few orders come in, but there are also times when I can earn even more than my salary at my previous company.
But money is not the only thing she's gained.
At the beginning, I thought the work was all about myself, my observations, my skills, but as more customers make orders, they also give me some advice. Some of them are really inspiring and have helped me perfect the work.
Online, Pan found a group of people sharing the same interest. They are from different parts of China and have different professional backgrounds. But they have one thing in common. Making clay food miniature is a big part of their lives. So far, Pan says the number of people making food miniature in China is still small. But as more orders come in, she feels there is hope that the art can become better known to more and more people.
That was Sao Bing reporting. An exhibition of ancient Egyptian treasures is currently on display at China World Art Museum in Beijing. Ding Suyue has the highlights.
Ancient Egyptian civilization has always been associated with mystery. This exhibition will satisfy visitors' curiosity and give them a chance to experience the diverse culture of Egypt.
What happened during the Greco-Roman period in Egyptian history? For ancient Egyptians,